What if the voice inside your head isn't trying to protect you? What if it's keeping you trapped? Right now, someone is replaying a conversation they had 3 years ago. Someone else is imagining an argument that hasn't happened yet. Someone is lying awake creating 10 different futures for a problem that may never exist, and maybe that someone is you. Overthinking feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like you're solving something. But what if every extra thought is pulling you further away from the answer? Tonight, we investigate one of the most convincing illusions the human mind can create: the belief that if you just think a little longer, everything will finally make sense. Case file number 004. The psychology of overthinking. Most people think overthinking means thinking too much, but psychology suggests that's not actually what's happening. Because overthinking isn't defined by the number of thoughts you have, it's defined by what those thoughts keep doing. They don't move forward. They don't reach conclusions. They simply go in circles. Imagine walking onto a treadmill. At first, it feels like you're making progress. Your legs are moving. Your heart is racing. You're putting in effort. But after an hour, you look up and realize you haven't moved an inch. That's overthinking. Your mind works harder without getting closer to peace. Which raises an important question. If overthinking doesn't solve problems, then why does the brain keep doing it? For decades, psychologists have searched for that answer, and what they discovered changes the way we think about thinking itself. Because the brain doesn't overthink to torture you. It overthinks because somewhere deep inside, it believes it's protecting you. Because from an evolutionary perspective, the brain has one job above everything else: keep you alive. Not happy, not confident, alive. Thousands of years ago, thinking ahead often meant surviving. The person who imagined danger before everyone else was usually the one who made it home. The rustling in the bushes might have been the wind, or it might have been a predator. The brain didn't wait to find out. It prepared, just in case. That ancient survival system still exists inside you. The problem is, the dangers have changed. Today, most of us aren't running from wild animals. We're running from uncertainty. What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I made the wrong decision? What if I embarrassed myself? What if tomorrow goes terribly? Your brain treats those questions as if they're life-threatening, even when they aren't. And that's where overthinking quietly begins. Not with answers, with what-ifs. One unanswered question becomes two. Two become five. Five become 50. Until eventually you're no longer solving a problem. You're feeding it. Psychologists call this rumination, a mental process where the mind repeatedly returns to the same thoughts without ever reaching a satisfying conclusion. Notice the difference. Reflection helps you understand the past. Rumination keeps you trapped inside it. Imagine dropping your keys into a muddy lake. Looking into the water once makes sense. Looking twice also makes sense. But if you spend 6 hours staring into the same muddy water, hoping it suddenly becomes clear, you're no longer searching. You're stuck. That's exactly what rumination does. It convinces you that more thinking will eventually create clarity, when in reality, it's the endless thinking itself that keeps the water cloudy. But the investigation doesn't end there, because if rumination explains why we replay our thoughts, it still doesn't explain why unfinished problems are so difficult to let go of. Imagine watching your favorite movie, right until the final 5 minutes. Just as the mystery is about to be solved, the screen suddenly goes black. No ending, no explanation, no answers. You'd probably spend the rest of the day wondering what happened, not because you wanted to, because your brain wouldn't let it go. In the 1920s, Russian psychologist Bluma Zygarnik noticed something fascinating. She observed that waiters could remember unpaid customer orders with incredible accuracy. But the moment the bill was paid, they quickly forgot them. Why? Because unfinished tasks occupied the mind far more than completed ones. This became known as the Zygarnik effect. the tendency for unfinished experiences to stay active inside our minds. Think about your own life, the conversation that ended awkwardly, the message that never got a reply, the opportunity you didn't take, the apology you never received, the decision you're still unsure about. Notice something? Your mind doesn't replay what feels complete. It replays what still feels open. Overthinking often isn't your brain searching for answers. It's your brain desperately trying to close a chapter it believes is still unfinished. But here's where the investigation takes an unexpected turn, because sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes there isn't closure. Sometimes the uncertainty never disappears. And for the overthinking mind, that possibility feels almost unbearable. And maybe that's because the brain has a habit that few people ever notice. It confuses certainty with safety. Think about it. Would you rather know you're about to fail, or spend days wondering whether you will? For most people, the uncertainty hurts more. The human brain is remarkably uncomfortable with unanswered questions. It would often rather believe a painful certainty than live with an unknown possibility. Which is why overthinking makes such a convincing promise. Keep thinking. You'll figure it out. You'll finally feel certain. But certainty rarely arrives. Instead, your brain simply finds another possibility, another scenario, another outcome, another what if. This creates something psychologists call analysis paralysis, the point where thinking becomes so excessive that action feels impossible. Imagine standing at a crossroads. There are only two paths. Neither looks dangerous, neither looks perfect. You tell yourself, I'll choose when I'm completely sure. So you keep standing there. Minutes become hours. Hours become days. The paths never change, only the amount of time you've spent not moving. Overthinking often feels like preparation, but sometimes it's simply procrastination wearing a disguise. Research by psychologist Barry Schwartz, author of The Paradox of Choice, revealed something equally surprising. When people are given too many options, they often become less satisfied with the choice they eventually make. Not more, less. Because once the decision is made, the overthinking mind immediately begins asking, what if the other choice was better? Suddenly, the decision isn't over. It's restarted. Inside your own head. Again, and again, and again. That's the cruel trick of overthinking. It convinces you that one more thought will finally bring peace, when in reality, it's often the next thought that steals it. So, how do you escape a prison your own mind keeps rebuilding? Ironically, not by thinking harder, but by noticing that you're thinking at all. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying the way our minds make decisions. His research suggested that the brain operates using two different systems. One is fast, automatic, emotional. The other is slow, deliberate, logical. Overthinking feels like you're using the logical part of your brain, but after a certain point, something unexpected happens. Logic quietly steps aside. Emotion takes over. You're no longer searching for the best answer. You're searching for relief, and relief keeps moving. Every answer creates another question. Every reassurance lasts a few minutes before another doubt appears. Think about the last time you checked your phone. After sending an important message, you read it once, then again. Then you wondered, did that sound weird? Maybe you opened the chat a fifth time, not because the message changed, because your anxiety wanted another look. The message stayed exactly the same. Only your fear kept changing. That's one of the strangest things about overthinking. It creates the illusion that certainty is always one more thought away. But certainty isn't what the mind is actually chasing. Control is. If I can predict everything, nothing can surprise me. If I imagine every possible outcome, nothing can hurt me. If I prepare for every mistake, I'll never fail. It sounds reasonable until you realize life has never worked that way. No amount of thinking has ever guaranteed a perfect tomorrow, and yet millions of people spend countless hours trying to solve a future that hasn't even arrived. Perhaps that's why one simple sentence has helped so many people break the cycle. Not because it magically removes anxiety, but because it exposes what overthinking has been hiding. You don't have to believe every thought you think. Read that again. Not every thought deserves your trust. If a stranger walked up to you and whispered, "You'll fail. You'll embarrass yourself. Nobody likes you," you probably wouldn't believe them. You'd question them. You'd ask, "Where's your evidence?" Yet when those exact same words come from inside your own head, they suddenly sound like facts. Psychologists call this cognitive fusion, the tendency to become so attached to our thoughts that we mistake them for reality. But thoughts are not facts. They're mental events, predictions, interpretations, possibilities. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're completely wrong. Imagine sitting beside a busy highway. Hundreds of cars pass by. You notice them, but you don't chase every single one. You simply let them pass. Your thoughts can work the same way. Not every thought needs your attention. Not every worry deserves another hour. Not every fear requires another investigation. Sometimes, the healthiest thing the mind can do isn't finding the perfect answer. It's allowing the unanswered question to exist. Because here's the truth that overthinking never wants you to discover. Peace doesn't always come after certainty. Sometimes, peace comes after acceptance. The acceptance that you cannot predict everything, you cannot control everything, and you were never supposed to. So where does that leave us? Certainly not with the idea that thinking is the enemy. After all, your ability to think is one of the greatest gifts your mind possesses. It's how you learn, how you create, how you solve problems, how you imagine a better future. The problem was never thinking. It was believing that every thought deserved your attention. Overthinking doesn't begin because you're weak. It begins because your brain cares. It wants certainty. It wants control. It wants to protect you from pain that hasn't happened yet. But protection can quietly become imprisonment. When every decision requires another hour, every conversation demands another replay, and every possibility becomes another reason to stay still. The investigation was never about silencing your mind. It was about changing your relationship with it, learning to notice a thought without obeying it, learning to feel uncertainty without trying to eliminate it, learning that sometimes the bravest decision isn't finding the perfect answer. It's taking the next step without one. 4 files, 4 mysteries, 4 reminders that the human mind often creates the very traps it's trying to escape. Perhaps overthinking was never proof that you cared too much. Perhaps it was proof that you believed certainty was the price of peace. This has been Mind Unraveled, Case File, number 004. The psychology of overthinking is now closed. Until next time, stay curious, question your thoughts, look beneath the surface, because sometimes the loudest voice in your mind is also the least reliable. And remember, every mind leaves clues. Like and subscribe and join us in investigating the very next case. Thank you.